Free TV, in association with getoutofdebtfree.org.
Nick Kollerstrom, very glad to have you here. Nick is going to talk to us about the moon. He has at least 30 years experience of doing the lunar calendar and a PhD in lunar theory. So Nick, would you like to come and tell us a bit more about ancient views and our mysterious moon? Thank you.
Okay, thanks Lucy. So it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here talking about what is in a sense my favourite subject. And we just had a new moon at 3 o'clock this morning. Okay, that's when the sun and moon came together in the sky, and it means it's invisible, you can't see the moon now, so it's the beginning of we're coming up to what would have been the beginning of a new lunar month. Traditionally the lunar months are when you first saw the little crescent of the new moon. Okay, now we're going to go back to ancient experience of the moon in Bronze Age culture. So that's quite ancient, a mythic period of history, and look at views on the moon. Why should we do that? What's the point of doing that? Well, partly, let me suggest, the moon is a complete enigma from a modern astronomical point of view. Logically, it shouldn't be there in terms of the theories of modern astronomers. What is the Earth doing with a companion planet exactly the same size, appearing the same size in the sky as the Sun by a mysterious scaling procedure, and it revolves round on its axis every 27 days. Okay, it revolves in space at the same period as it revolves around the Earth. 27.3 days it goes around the Earth, and so the same side mysteriously always faces towards us. And we get a funny synchrony with the Sun as well. How does the Sun rotate? How do we experience the Sun's rotation? We experience it with sunspots. And if you count the average time when you see sunspots coming back again, it's 27.3 days. So astronomers are rather puzzled what the Sun is doing with the moon's rotation period in this way, because the Sun has different rotation periods, different latitudes, but the average sunspot rotation is 27 and a third days. Also, the moon, astronomers can't really get any theory of its origin that makes a lot of sense. Okay, they initially thought it had spun off from the Earth, then they found there wasn't nearly enough angular momentum in the system to have the moon spinning off from the Earth, because angular momentum is conserved, it doesn't fade away. And then after the Apollo missions they said, oh no, before they said, oh, it must have been captured. Maybe it was wandering through outer space and somehow got captured by the Earth. Then during the Apollo missions in the 1960s they realised, well hang on, the moon is nearly circular in its orbit. So very nearly circular. We can't see it being nearer or further from us, and it's very tricky to get that with a captured. If it were captured but from outer space, it would be highly elliptical in its motion. Okay, so that clobbered the capture theory of the moon's origin. It couldn't really have come in from outer space and just got caught by the Earth. The moon is strangely low density, almost only half the density of the Earth. So some people said, well, is it hollow? Well, it might have hollow caverns in it. Then they found when they dropped something on the moon, it rang like a gong for 3 hours. So it had some very brittle structure with terrific resonance. On Earth, earthquakes only last for a few seconds and they fade away. So how come the moon had that very resonant structure? Well, people don't now believe that it's hollow, but strangely low density. Then it had very high density elements right on the surface facing us. Uranium, titanium, iron. Weirdly high melting point metals were on the huge lava seas you see on the moon. When you look up at the moon, you see the man on the moon face, and there's actually huge seas of once liquid lava that are actually charcoal dark when they go up there. So how did those huge seas, they're found to have these very high melting point metals like titanium in them, 10% titanium on the moon, far higher proportion than anything on Earth. Well, how did that get there, for goodness sake? And how did the moon get so hot to have those lava seas once molten? So everything about the moon's theory they came back with from the Apollo missions turned out to be rather bizarre and mind-boggling. If the moon was so hot, if it was once molten, then shouldn't the heavy metals have drifted into the centre and you'd have a core? Well, there can't be any core of the moon, no metallic core, partly because it hasn't got a magnetic field. Earth's got a big magnetic field, and we suppose it's loads of iron and nickel in the core. Nothing like that on the moon, okay? So the moon is a sort of companion planet, and like Venus and Mars, it hasn't really got a magnetic field of its own. So part of the mystery of there being life on Earth is that we've got a wonderful big magnetic field, magnetosphere, protecting us, and Seleni's sphere hasn't got that, okay? So how do you account for something very light, only half Earth's density, very neatly circular orbit, and there's a worse problem because it's not in the plane of the equator. If it spun off from the Earth, it would be in the plane of the equator. There's a whole lot of moons that are produced like from Jupiter, which are spun off from the planet, and they orbit around in the plane of the equator. Okay, that's what you'd expect from a spinning planet. Well, the moon isn't. It's tilted at an angle to the equator, and then if it was captured, there are captured moons that would be on the plane of the ecliptic. That's all the planets go around the sun, the plane of the ecliptic. And if the moon had been captured by Earth from outer space, it would you'd expect it to be in that ecliptic plane, sort of. So it's at 5 degrees to that ecliptic plane. So it's got its own plane which nothing else goes in. So it's unique. It's part of the deep mystery, like the riddle of the Sphinx, that the moon has got its own orbit plane which nothing else has, right? Now, why does that matter, 5-degree tilt? Well, it's so important for our experience of life because it gives us eclipses, right? Eclipses have terrific resonance for ancient peoples. What do eclipses mean? When do they happen? And they happen now and then when that intersection lines up with the full and new moon. Like just now we've had a new moon, right? Now, if that was on the plane of those planes came together, that would be an eclipse of the sun, right? Eclipse of the sun at the new moon. And so that just happens now and then, once or twice a year, because of that special orbit plane of the moon. So with the moon, it looks like it's designed and put into that position by some wonderful harmony. It doesn't look like chance at all. For example, we've got just 12 months in the year. How many times do the sun and moon meet every year? Well, they meet just over 12 times. Okay, now that's enormously important. It means in the ancient calendars we're going to look at when the calendars were lunar, and it means every third year you have to have 13 months. So you keep the calendar jogging along with 12 months in a year, and every third year you'd have a 13th month put in. Okay, so that's very important. And the 12-fold meeting of the sun and moon also led to the image of the zodiac in space with 30-degree divisions. That is the 30 days of each lunar month. So the exact interaction of sun and moon has been enormously important for our sense of world harmony, development of mathematics, and our sense of belonging in the universe. 12 months of the year, and so forth. If you gaze up at the silvery moon at night time, you see a kind of lovely pattern that inspires poets with silvery traces on the moon. And can you see a face in it, or can you see some pattern on it, or what shape is made by the huge lava seas? Whereas on the back of the moon, there's nothing like that at all. The back of the moon is totally boring, totally different. It's just sort of mountain ranges, and it hasn't got that fascinating sort of silver streaks and lovely lava seas. So the whole moon is polarised facing us. So however you want to believe the moon came into existence, it came into existence a lot to do with facing towards the Earth. Okay, I mentioned earlier that the very heavy density masses of heavy melting point metals, they're actually, weirdly enough, they're underneath the big lava seas, which isn't where you'd expect them to be. Okay, so I'm giving you an image of the moon that's a bit surreal, and astronomers could never make sense of it. It was an enigma, a paradox, that the the orbiting spacecraft would dip when they went over the lava seas because of the gravity pull. The lava seas are denser and heavier than the mountains. The big 5-mile high mountains on the moon were less dense than the seas. So it was a kind of Alice through the looking glass kind of world in which none of the theories could quite hang together. Astronomers now have a theory, the latest one they've had, is that it was a big smash up. Something hit the Earth and somehow the moon came out of it. And that's a kind of bit insulting to the wonderful Selene sphere that we've got. And you wouldn't expect it to be so spherical in its orbit and circular and marvellously harmonious in its motions. And you wouldn't particularly expect it to be facing the Earth if any of that had happened. Okay, so I'd like to suggest that modern astronomy hasn't got a lot to say about how the moon was formed. And maybe we have to look in some more archetypal sense of where it came from. Okay? Well, here's the Apollo missions. May I ask people here whether you believe they really went to the moon or not?
I believe.
Believe what?
They went to the moon.
They went to the moon, right. And
I believe they went to the moon, but the pictures we see ain't from the moon.
pictures don't, no, right, yeah. Yeah, anyone else? You? You reckon they really went there? Yeah.
I don't think they went there with the technology that they showed us.
No, right. Okay. Anyone else? Did they really go to the moon?
I don't know, but I think so. But it's mysterious why they never get back again.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think they were programmed to forget a whole lot of stuff when they got back, and they found they could remember the instructions they'd been given what to do at the moon, and they gathered bits of moon dust and stuff. But they couldn't seem to remember. They certainly couldn't get an experience of what it felt like to be on the moon, and they were rather worried about that. They couldn't convincingly tell people what it felt like to be on the moon, and I felt they were programmed, especially with UFOs and stuff they experienced and strange things they saw on the moon. They were told not to talk about. There's a whole lot of stuff they were told not to talk about, and I think that's why they seem very unconvincing when they talk to people. So somehow I think there's something very strange about the experience of being on the moon that they were programmed to forget. That's my feeling, yeah. But I suggest that 60 years ago they did really go there and really took some moon rock. The moon dust and moon rock is very fascinating. It has a simpler composition than the Earth. It has less elements in it, and it has shiny glass spheres they found that reflect different colours. Something to do with why the moon looks so bright when you see a full moon. And I think there was one or two elements on it that we don't find on Earth, isotopes and stuff. The lava seas were a dark charcoal colour.
This is textile.
Is it?
Moon rock, is it?
Oh, right. Okay. So we've looked at how the sun and moon appear the same size in the sky, and let's try to explore Sol and lunar in a bit more a mythic sense. In ancient times, you had moon goddesses: Diana, Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, and Hecate, the frightening goddess of the new moon, associated with sort of witchcraft. They were very feminine goddesses, feminine powers to do with the moon, and it's to do with what we need to turn to next, which is the female cycle and its mysterious adaptation to the length of the lunar month. Now, what is the average length of a woman's menstrual cycle?
28 days.
No. A lot of people think it's 28 days. Most people are brought up to think it's 28 days. It's actually between 29 and 30 days. Now, that is the period of meeting of the sun and moon, 29.5 days. It's called the synodic cycle of the moon. And let's have a look this is a graph. I don't know if you can see it. Enormous surveys were done over many years, getting women to chart their menstrual periods, and you got them to record it, say, for 2 years, and you got the average menstrual cycle. length. And this was done with thousands of women, and these are two large investigations. At the bottom, I need a stick here. At the bottom, yeah, if I could, is the age, woman's age, and at the top is the length in days. So here is teenage girls, that's age 20. So below the age of 20, that is 30 days. You can see the average period is about 32 days. They've got a longer or a slower period before childbearing years. During the peak childbearing years, between 20 and 30, this line here is the length of the lunar month, 29.5 days. Can you see that during peak childbearing years, the average length of the female menstrual period is the same as the lunar month? Okay, when you get older, say 40 years, 45 years, it gets shorter. It's 28 or 27 days for older women. And then as you get up to 50, the menstrual cycle fades away, and once again it becomes quite slow. Now, did that make sense? So the overall mean average is between 29 and 30. Also, there are surveys showing groups of sexually active women have mean periods closer to the lunar month than women who are being celibate. They will tend to be more in sync with the lunar month. There are other investigations showing that if you look at women whose periods are around the lunar month, that's 28 to 30 days, if you take that, about a third of women, a third in total, they will tend to be in sync either with the full moon or with the new moon. Okay? I will say that in archetypal sense, the bleeding period corresponds with the new moon. That's the time we're at now, when the moon disappears from view, when the sun and moon meet together in the sky. So in myth, legend and fairy tales, that is the time when women are bleeding, or when they have they often withdraw, so-called primitive societies, from society, so they're together in some sort of menstrual seclusion, and they don't get on with ordinary life. I think there's a lot to be said for something like this, of recognition of this period, which can have sort of vivid, intense dreams and so on. And in contrast, the full moon is traditionally associated with fertility, and that is more the Diana, the Diana goddess of fertility, and that is to do with feasting and sort of abundance, and maybe men bringing the hunt home, coming home with the hunt. So you get these two opposite ends of the lunar month. Okay? Let's move on. Yeah, let's look at one or two legends involving the sun and moon. Sleeping Beauty is a fairy tale about the arrival of patriarchy, where the 13th lunar month gets knocked out. If you remember, the king in the fairy tale of the Sleeping Beauty calls a feast for his new daughter, the princess who's just been born. I think it's a baptism party, and the king only has 12 golden plates, and so, but there are 13 fairies or wise women in the kingdom, and one of them cannot be invited, therefore, because the king's only got 12 golden plates, and the one who cannot be invited comes and puts a curse on the story, and the curse is that the princess will bleed when she gets to be 15 years old, or will prick herself and bleed. So that's the story about the king, who's as it were tuned into the solar calendar. He just wants 12 months in the year, and so that 12 months in the year is gonna lose the moon. The moon is going to be left out of the story, and historically that happened around the time of Julius Caesar, when the calendar was reformed, and they had 12 solar calendar months. Okay. So you can think, if you like, of the Ides of March, when Julius Caesar was assassinated. That used to mean the middle of a lunar month, which would have been the full moon, right? That's what the Ides would have meant, the full moon. And whereas it just meant the 15th of March in a solar calendar from then on. Okay. So yes, so from then on we've had a purely solar calendar, and I think and that is associated with a more male rational view of the world, and we lose the mystery of the moon from our society. Okay, anybody want to ask anything? Did that make sense, what I said about the fairy tale?
It did, but then
Yeah?
can you explain the relevance of the end of the fairy tale?
Okay, well, the king makes this disastrous step of wanting to get rid of the number 13, the 13th lunar month, and so the whole of time is undermined and it stops. Everything in the fairy tale is suspended and they go into a sleep, right? The whole realm goes into a sleep. So the cycles of time stop working. And then there's the prince has to go through some briar rose, so he would have to bleed. I think it's to do with bleeding to rescue the princess. So it's to do with the arrival of the menstrual cycle around that age, and how we experience it. I think that's the meaning of the fairy tale. Okay. There's another. Let's see. Oh no, I haven't quite got there. Okay, I think there's another one which I'd like to mention. It's Cinderella. This is another fairy tale about the ancient experience of the full and new moon and women bleeding at the new moon. There's not a lot said. Aristotle said women bleed at the waning of the moon, but there's not a lot in record. You find this tremendously important experience in legend, myth and fairy tale, rather than people kind of writing it down. In Cinderella, you get she's cinders, she's dry, she's cooking, and by the way, I'm taking a lot of this mythic interpretation from a book by anthropologist Chris Knight called Blood Relations. That he goes into all this. Okay, Cinderella in the fairy tale right across Europe, she's dry and cinders, she does cooking, and that's to do with the full moon and time of sort of ceremony and abundance and everyone having a good time. Okay? Now, there's a story about being taken to the ball by the prince, and she's not allowed to be with him, and the so-called ugly sisters pass themselves off in the fairy tale, and the prince, how does he thinks he's got his Cinderella, and then he discovers that the woman he's got from the ball is actually bleeding. There's something about her foot in a shoe, and they have to cut the shoe to fit it and everything, and the little bird says, look, she's bleeding. So the ugly sisters are discovered because they're bleeding. He says, oh yuck, I don't want that, I don't want a woman who's bleeding, and he sort of takes her back. So he goes to the ball another night, and it happens again that he discovers he's got an ugly sister, not because she looks ugly, but because she's bleeding. That's in the fairy tale. Okay, I may add, this bit is often missed out from the fairy tale of the Cinderella. It's a wonderful fairy tale, but I suggest the meaning is that the girl he wants is not bleeding. She's dry. That's a Cinderella, and the ugly sisters are. So it's part of the idea of menstruation as something that men experienced as a curse. And as we're now at this period of the moon, this new moon, let me say that of the Greek goddesses, this was Hecate. Hecate was feared by men, and the whole story of witchcraft, what later became witchcraft, was associated with the Hecate mysteries. That's the dark moon, okay? When nothing is visible in the night sky. We haven't quite got the experience of darkness now because we have electricity everywhere. If you imagine at the new moon, it was all quite dark, and that was the time of the Hecate mysteries, and it was women getting together, and the men weren't quite sure what they did, but they had a lot of power, seemed to have a lot of power. So I suggest that these tremendous goddesses you had in ancient Greece, Diana, Artemis, Hecate, were to do with the synchrony that women had. They were in sync at that time. Okay. I don't know if you want me to go into a story, the idea of how women have got that synchrony, because no other animals do have, or virtually hardly any other animals do have that synchrony with the moon. They have an estrus cycle, which is totally different. So the experience of being human, how come we are human and we're different from monkeys and other animals? Animals have the estrus cycle, which is what you'd kind of expect on a theory of evolution, whereby the period of fertile, when the animal is fertile, is advertised and everyone knows about it. And they come on heat, they're on heat then, okay? So everyone goes for the female. And the opposite end of the period of the bleeding is hardly noticed, and that reverses for the human cycle, and men can't tell when a woman is on heat, estrus, and what you can tell is what is of no survival value whatever when a woman's having a period. That's very conspicuous. So that's paradoxical if you're thinking of the struggle for survival. But it makes sense in terms of the beginning of civilization. You can only have civilized life if men don't know when the woman is on heat. They can't all be going for a woman who's on heat. Sorry, I'm making a rather big story rather short here, but the female cycle is mysterious from a Darwinian point of view. Why is the period being on heat not experienced? Why do women themselves often not know when they're fertile or on heat, whereas we do know what is of no evidence survival value when they're having a period. Period is the opposite end, when the old womb is dying away, and I'm saying that's the new moon end of the cycle. So we've got a cycle which is tuned into the moon between 29 and 30 days, and it's quite mysterious from an evolutionary point of view. Would anyone like to comment on this? We could add that the period of conception, from conception, period of gestation, from conception to birth, is 266 days. That's exactly 9 lunar months. Okay? So here again, we've got a uniquely human feature of tuning into the lunar month. 9 times do the sun and moon meet as a child comes into this world through a mother's womb. So imagine if you're in a civilization where conception happened at the full moon. Imagine this is ancient Greece. Conception happens at the full moon. Then birth is going to tend to happen at the full moon as well, 9 moons later, isn't it? So you're going to see the full moon as something mighty, as bringing children and fertility and conception. Okay? So anthropology is a puzzle that some early societies used to think the moon brought children more than the man's insemination. Well, that's just that synchrony is quite important. I've shown with animals like horses that they really are more fertile. Mares are more fertile at the full moon. So even with the estrus cycle, you still have the moon bringing fertility, and this is so with a lot of creatures that they become fertile at the full moon. Sometimes at the new moon, but the moon is a dead, lifeless, barren, dry sphere. Has no water on it, or very little. But somehow the enigma is that it affects life and fertility and growth on Earth. That's an enigma. Okay, it's part of the mystery of our existence. How can it be that a sphere a 250,000 miles away, without any water circulating in its system, what on earth business has that got in being connected with fertility and life and growth? For example, I believe that seeds, if you let seeds germinate, you'll find they germinate a bit better at full moon than at other part of the month. So this is some deep connection between Earth and Moon, and where did it come from? Okay.
Is the full moon better for like business and like watching on festivals? I mean, is that a general thing that?
Well, for festivals, absolutely. You should have a festival at the full moon. Newman is more introvert, so in a way you should have had this festival at full moon.
I heard a study on a radio station a little while ago, and they've done a study in America of table dancing ladies, and what they did was they got them to write down when their cycle was, and how much money they earned on each part of the cycle. So an estrus cycle.
Oh, fantastic!
And they earned less money when they were on their monthly cycle than they did when they wasn't, when they was at their prime time for receiving, for bearing a child.
Ah, right.
So they had more money, even though they didn't know it, realise what they was doing to do their estrus cycle. There was only more money when there was like.
Hey, look, that is really good. Can we have you on the television? Would you come and tell us? I thought that was rather interesting. I think it's terribly important that the moon does affect us, but so often experiments are designed badly and they come out with a negative result. And people say, oh, well, smart ass skeptics then say, oh, well, we told you, it doesn't work. So this gentleman is just going to tell us an amazing story about American lap dancers who are,
Hello. Yeah, there was a study they'd done in America. I listened to a show called Coast to Coast AM. I don't know if anybody listens to it. I think it was 1,000 ladies they did, and what they'd done, they got them to write down when their monthly period was and what they earned during that month, and they actually earned less money when they was on their period than they was when they was fertile to receive children. So, but yeah, and it was probably a third the amount money as well. So.
Okay, cheers.
Yeah.
So I think the lunar cycle has a subtle effect on fertility. Women can get themselves in tune with the moon now. Women know perfectly well that if they live together for a bit, their periods will synchronise. Okay, and this is very much ignored by biology because it doesn't want to understand why the female cycle should be designed in that way, that women get in tune with each other if they live together for a bit. Well, this is terribly important. And in antiquity, the whole civilization was working in that manner, that women were in sync with each other, or some proportion of them were, and with the moon. Okay, I want to move on now to an 8-year period called Octa Eteris, of a calendar of the ancient world. Now, we're going back to Bronze Age culture, and this is before what is called the Metonic cycle. That's used for a couple of thousand years, a 19-year period whereby the sun and moon come together. Now, we're going back before that, and there was an 8-year period, not quite so exact, and it's called Octa Eteris, and that turns up in Greek myths and legends. For example, I'll tell you one, Atalante, she's a lunar type figure. She always wins the race, and the story of 3 golden apples. Now, over this 8-year period, you have to put in 3 extra moons to get the whole calendar working. It's nice and simple. Every 8 years, you have 12 months in the year, right? These are lunar months. Then 3 times in that 8-year period, you have to put in an extra lunar month, right? So it's a nice simple way. It keeps the sun and moon jogging along together if every 8 years you add in 3 lunar months. And that was called the Octa Eteris, okay? So in the myth of Atalante, she's running along and she keeps winning, and the contestant gets beheaded or something, and he, I think Venus comes into this story. Venus, she gives him 3 golden apples. She throws, Atalante has to stop to pick up those 3 golden apples. Okay, how does Venus come into the story? Well, there's a tremendous synchrony in that 8-year period between the moon, sun and moon, and also Venus. Venus also does a tremendous process of appearing and disappearing in the sky every 8 years. I hope some of you are familiar with this. I can't really go into it all, but Venus has a fundamental 8-year period of appearing and disappearing in the sky, and being seen as the evening star, morning star. So it's a big terrific pentagram it weaves every 8 years, and so that was then reinforcing this octaeteris of the sun and moon. So that was a tremendous concordance they experienced in the ancient world, and here is what we nowadays, that's nowadays how we look at the Venus period, okay? Every 8 years it weaves around the Earth this marvellous mandala of pure beauty and harmony, and comes back to the same position. Well, they would see it differently in terms of Venus appearing and disappearing in the sky, okay? So is that okay? So that would have been about 4,000 years old ago in ancient Babylon. There would have been Venus tablets recording the appearance and disappearance of Venus over an 8-year period. And they knew that after that 8-year period, Venus was back at the same position in the zodiac on the same day of the year. Sorry, this is before the zodiac, same position in the sky, same day, same part of the year. And so that would reinforce this idea that 8 years was somehow terribly important. Here is about 12th century BC. You've probably all seen this in the British Museum somewhere. It's a king coming up to the goddess Inanna, and he's actually got his daughter behind him, so introducing his daughter. Sorry, she's got a bit cut off. And there are 3 things in the sky. That's the moon, and I think that's the sun, and I think that's Venus. Now, both the sun and Venus are 8-fold in the Babylonian image, so it's a bit hard to tell which is which. Those are the 3 planets you see in the sky in the Babylonian, the ancient Babylons carved. Those 3 planets were the most important, and they have this terrific concordance in the 8-year cycle. Okay, and that then passes over into Greek myth and legend, and the Greeks they just have it as lunar. It's just lunar. They don't quite have the ancient Babylonian Venus 8-year period as well, and that then gives you the period of the Olympic Games, which is 8 years and then 4 years, and that the 8-year and 4-year Olympic Games starts ticking along in accord with this octaeteris. Okay, so the octaeteris has deep mythic and legendary significance in Greek mythology. The later, more exact Metonic cycle would never have had. Now, let's go back to, surprisingly enough, I'm going to take you to England now, to Avebury. Now, this is obviously a far earlier period. This is Bronze Age culture. People date Avebury to about 3000 BC, but they don't really know. You can't really exactly date Avebury like you can date Stonehenge. So it might be 1,000 years older. You just don't know when. I don't think you really know when Avebury was. Something incredibly primordial about the rocks at Avebury. That it's like when time began when you wander around those rocks at Avebury. Anyway, Robin Heath is our British sort of visionary who's found the lunar meaning, the real lunar meaning of Avebury and Stonehenge in our time. I expect some of you have come across his stuff. And academics don't like it because they don't like the idea there's any meaning in the assembly of these tremendous stones. I think, oh, primitive man, you know. Now, the 99, so the big surround of Avebury that you can hardly see anymore because it's been so damaged, most likely had 99 stones in it. That's the most likely number of the total number of stones around Avebury. So what? Well, that is, in the octaeteris, the 8-year period we've been talking about, that is the number of moons. So, if you can believe it, 5,000 years ago, the very dawn of British culture and civilization, Avebury, older than Stonehenge, you had the counting of that 8-year period. Now, academics and archaeologists don't like this. They don't like the idea of intelligent culture existing in this country before it existed in Babylon. Okay, they like to think Babylon got its stuff from Sumeria, and that is the most ancient mathematical culture in the world. Well, we've got something very ancient here in Avebury, and I checked up on what Robin Heath said, and I endorse this idea that 99 is the most likely number of that big circle. And I'd say academics just want to say, oh, we're not sure about the number, because they're not interested in counting the number, and they don't like the idea that ancient Britons could count the number. Okay? Now let's go now to what is inside Avebury. Can you see there are two rings inside Avebury? The north wheel and the south wheel. Now I hope you've all been to visit Avebury, had a glass of beer at the Red Lion in the middle, and I fear you may not be able to see this slide, but that is the two wheels, and the top it's got 27 stones and the bottom has got 29 stones. Can anyone see that at all? Yeah, right. Okay. Now this is again the thing that astronomers absolutely ignore. They don't want to know about it. Archaeologists absolutely want to ignore it. Anthropologists don't want to know about it. Why not? Because there's a taboo against intelligence. There's a taboo against the idea that the ancient Britons could count these stones that they put up. Now, as Robin Heath points out, it would be far easier to put 28 and 30 stones in rings. If you were designing that, you'd probably say, well, yeah, sure, I can do 28 or 30 stones in those big rings, but these odd numbers, 27 and 29, I don't know how we're going to design that. Well, they've been designed pretty damn accurately, and they were smashed up. True, that was smashed up. There's only about two still standing of the upper circle. And it's interesting, it's the Age of Reason, the 18th century, the most intense period of smashing up the Avebury stones and burning them, as if somehow what they call reason and rationality couldn't endure the vast presence of these ancient stones. Okay, but experts can count them, and I've looked in the Royal Society Library at the records of people going with their equipment to sound out where the stones are, and I want to confirm what Robin Heath has said, that the most likely number is 27. I think everyone agrees that the bottom is 29, but I find it extremely bizarre that no one prior to Robin Heath, it took me several years to realise this, no one prior to Robin Heath ever has pointed out that these are the two fundamental lunar cycles. You've got 27 days for the moon to revolve around its own axis and in space, right? Every 27 days the moon comes back to the same star. 29 days, sun and moon meet together. So you got a culture, the beginning of British civilization, which for some reason wanted to have these two fundamental lunar cycles in a huge 100 metre wide stones. And the whole of Stonehenge could fit into one of those stone circles, okay? 100 metre wide. I think there's a megalithic. Tom's megalithic rods measure the diameter of one of them. And as well as that, I'll just throw in this a bit further. You've got a GPS coordinate thing. It's quite easy to have now. Your latitude. If you divide a circle into seven, you get a degree at 1/7 of a degree, right? Which is the slope angle of the Great Pyramid, and that is. Anyone want to tell us? It's the latitude of Avebury. It's 51 degrees, 40 arc minutes, and 25 arc seconds. But absolutely exactly, the 1/7 latitude of planet Earth goes through those two circles. So I recommend next time you're there, have a glass of beer in the Red Lion, which is just sort of. Actually, the Red Lion is covering over one of these. It's shocking the way this very precious remains of ancient Britain is covered over and rebuilt. So the Red Lion forecourt actually covers over some of that 27 stone wheel. And just mull over this concept. Avebury was a tremendous processional experience for all the people, right? It wasn't like Stonehenge, which was for some sort of clique to do their thing. Not a clique, high priests or whatever. Avebury was for all the people, and there was a tremendous processional way coming into the big circle, and another tremendous processional way going out. And it's unfortunate that the stones which still exist for those processional ways are flattened now with farmers' fields, and people don't see the vast immensity of Avebury. And that processional way would have come in, and it looks like it would, just from those processional ways, it would have gone through those two stones. So whatever it was, this tremendous experience they had, they would have walked along this exact 1/7 latitude of the Earth, and gone between those two wheels, two wheels. One of them, I call it the starry wheel. The 27, that is the starry wheel. That is the moon and the stars, okay? Whereas the other wheel is the meeting of the sun and moon. Okay, did that make sense? Okay, now this is we're talking about the lunar meaning of this ancient culture. Now the next thing after that, younger than Avebury, is Stonehenge, and so we're talking about 2600 BC, when the tremendous Sarsen ring was constructed of Stonehenge. Can anyone tell me how many Sarsens there are in the Sarsen ring of Stonehenge? The answer is 29 and a half. Okay, it's important for you to appreciate that lunar number, which you will not find in your books on Stonehenge. Why do books on Stonehenge not mention the fact that this Sarsen ring is designed to count the lunar month? I mean, doesn't that matter? You know, astronomers and archaeologists just want this solar alignment. You know, there's a midsummer, midwinter solar alignment at Stonehenge, and that was more recent than this. Let's be clear, this tremendous awesome achievement of Stonehenge of having carved lintels and a tremendous circle, that is 2600 BC. That is before the big solar trilithons were put up. The big solar trilithons point towards the midsummer midwinter axis, and that's a horseshoe shaped thing, okay, and that's more recent. So the enigma and paradox of Stonehenge is how come the more recent trilithons were put inside this big wheel. Anyway, that's a bit of a paradox for you. But the dating does put this as more ancient, and so this is the lunar meaning. Yeah, here we can see both. Here is the horseshoe in the middle, the huge trilithons pointing towards that solar midsummer axis, and around them, the poetry and the glory of Stonehenge is this terrific Sarsen ring. And can you see one here? It's important that this concept of a half, this would have been utterly incomprehensible to the people at the time. The idea of refraction, okay? There would have only been a small priesthood, or whatever you want to call them, elite, responsible for whoever made Stonehenge, that could understand the idea of refraction. That there was 29 and a half days between the sun and moon. Now, can you all see that little stone there? It's half size. Now, if you read books on Stonehenge, they'll say, "Oh, well, that one's broken off." Broken off. No, it's not broken off. It's important if you go to Stonehenge, lean against that half-size stone. Have the experience of yourself leaning against that half-size stone, because that is a human-sized stone. You can lean against it and feel it's carved out for a human size, whereas the other ones are like giant, okay? They're not at a human size, they're somehow bigger, and we can't imagine how they were done. That half-size one would never have had a lintel over the top. There was no lintel that fitted over the top. Okay, so that is the lunar meaning of these Sarsens put up 2600 BC, and that echoed then what was done at Avebury. We could go into this a bit more. For example, around the outside of Stonehenge, not shown here, what's called the Aubrey holes, 56 of them. Those are the sum of the two wheels at Avebury. So you add up 27, 29, you get the number of the Aubrey holes around Stonehenge. And Stonehenge and Avebury are more or less exactly north-south of each other. At 18 miles, I think there's about 1 or 2 degrees difference. So you have to believe that they could tell what was due north and constructed these two more or less north-south of each other. And there is this tremendous arithmetic connection that obviously no book on Avebury or Stonehenge wants to talk about. The two wheels, 29, 27, add up to the Aubrey. So the Aubrey holes, if you like, they're 2 times 28. So that's a kind of schematic lunar month, which does not exist, but it's the average of the two real lunar months. Okay, well, I think that's all I want to say now about that ancient culture, that for some reason the moon was tremendously important, for those who built Avebury and Stonehenge, and you can still see that today, and there's still a complete taboo against talking about this, the lunar solar meaning, and the idea of intelligent purpose, which I find very bewildering. I mean, I'm a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, excuse me, mention this, and at one point I was on some commission about Stonehenge, and they chucked me off it, they didn't like my comments. For example, there were two rings around this called X and Y holes, rather boring name, X and Y holes, and they are 29 of one and 30 of the other. And this is the very last phase of Stonehenge, right? About 1600 BC. 29, and I said, well, obviously that's the beginning of a lunar calendar that has to alternate between 29 days and 30 days. And I said, oh no, we don't like that. No, I can't have that, no. So you won't find, if you've got any books of Stonehenge on your shelf, that it mentions that these so-called X and Y holes, 29 and 30, are immediately outside the big trilithons, 29.5 trilithons. I mean, what more obvious lunar imagination could you have? I can't see how you can express things more clearly, but this is totally blocked and repressed in our culture, and it's partly because I think we don't have enough respect for the feminine side of life. I think if we could tune in more to the moon, we could have more gentle culture, more aware of these cycles and how they're important for us. And I think it's important that people who founded this culture wanted to do this. Okay, right. Let's move on now. Where do I go next? Oh, well, does anyone want to discuss that at all or comment at all?
Are there any other kind of stone type constructions between Avebury and Stonehenge that you can see together? No,
that is sort of magic land where the crop circles all started appearing. No, they're much more in the west of England and north.
But they're really quite independent of each other. There's no kind of structural linkage on the ground.
No, right. No. Any other comments on what we've done so far? Have I got time for a bit more? Okay, now we're trying to look at Bronze Age culture, and I want to now go to something completely different, and that is the design of the pyramid, Great Pyramid, and this might be much earlier than Bronze Age culture. Okay, it might, but I think that the meaning somehow. Yeah, it might be pre-Bronze Age. We don't really know when the Great Pyramid was built, but I want to talk about the extraordinary concordance which the pyramid shows us, if I can. And it's about the scale of the Earth and the Moon. How the Earth, if you imagine the Moon brought down so it touches the Earth, John Michel showed in a very famous diagram that it squared the circle, and the Great Pyramid is somehow involved in this. I'll go straight to his diagram. Okay, this is John Michel's diagram, the late great John Michel, and this gives you a concordance to about 99.8%, within about 0.2%. That's the size of the Moon. If you use the most modern figures for the average diameter of the Earth and Moon, it gives you this slope angle of the Great Pyramid. The slope angle of the Great Pyramid has a very unique property which only a few people have the mathematical discernment to understand, whereby pi and phi come together. There's two transcendental functions, pi and phi come together in the slope angle of the Great Pyramid. For example, Graham Hancock recently explained this in one of his books. This is a nice way of showing the squaring of the circle. I don't know if you can all see this diagram. You put a square with a circle that has the same perimeter, and that Great Pyramid angle will just fit in on that diameter, and then you get the Earth and Moon to scale.
So if the Moon was a different size, the pyramid would have different angles?
Well, it wouldn't fit in that way. I think there is evidence. A whole lot of authors have believed that the Great Pyramid is somehow designed in accord with the scale of the Earth. Okay, because something to do with the landmass where the Great Pyramid was, greatest landmass, and also the vertical height of the Great Pyramid is in accord with the radius, polar radius of the Earth. I think it's the third power of 60 is the scaling factor, and that's within about 0.5%. And a lot of people have felt that is quite convincing and indicates that the Great Pyramid somehow connects with or resonates with the size of the Earth. But whether or not that's so, it's even more mysterious that it seems to give us this connection with the Earth-Moon ratio. Now I want to try, if we can, to look at this pi-phi concordance of the slope of the pyramid. If you picture the slope angle of the pyramid, you've got sides 1, phi and the square root of phi. So it's kind of organic growth of the three slope angles, and that then gives you the exact angle that you've got. Right. Okay, this shows the squaring of the circle that the Great Pyramid accomplishes. It's got 51 degrees, 52 arc minutes, and that is pi. Okay. Now, if you go about 1 arc minute less, 51 arc minutes, you get that phi triangle that I mentioned. And the four sides of the Great Pyramid are such that you can't tell the difference which one works better. So I'm just going to put to you that that 1 arc minute difference may seem insignificant, but it actually gives you a far closer alignment with the Earth and Moon if you use phi rather than pi. This is the startling fact I'm coming to, if I can. Okay, here are the two different triangles which are mysteriously concordant in the Great Pyramid of Giza. This is the squaring of the circle, such that the height of the pyramid gives you the radius of the circle, which is the same perimeter as the base. Okay, I think that gives you 4 pi 1, and this is the sort of geometric phi triangle, 1 square root of phi and phi, and those two are within an arc minute. Okay, sorry, I don't know if you can see this, but if you use the phi triangle, then you get that Earth-Moon concordance to a much higher degree, 0.02%, and I think that's a high enough concordance that we have to believe that it means something. That's like 2 parts in 10,000. So it's little appreciated that the phi concordance here, linking Earth and Moon, is actually much closer than the pi concordance in the Great Pyramid. It may seem so. I think there is some sort of divine meaning here that we can't readily, our rational minds can't easily fathom, whereby the Great Pyramid really does encode these some sort of meaning of the solar system. Okay.
Does this assume that the planet is static in size, not expanding on the
Yeah. I think that. Yeah. I mean, the Moon isn't quite spherical, but we just take it after.
There's no change going on there. We're assuming static.
Yeah, there wouldn't have been much. You get what's called Bailey's beads, and Bailey's beads are the tall mountains of the Moon, which the sun just glitters through the valleys of those mountains of the Moon during the solar eclipse. That's a quite amazing concordance, so there's no answer to why. That's a primary miracle of the world that we live in.
Biggest coincidence in the world.
Biggest coincidence in the world. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any other comments you'd like to share?
You've, sorry. No, I was just going to say that you've talked a lot. You've talked a lot about the fact that the movement of the Moon is important, or was important, to the ancient people right across the world, from the pyramids through to Avebury, even to the point where they've gone to the trouble of encoding its movements in fairy tales and such. Do you have any thoughts on why the movement of the Moon across the sky was important to those people?
Well, I have given a primary answer to that. That female fertility meant that the whole of some early, very prehistoric condition of our civilization was in tune with the moon, and the big ceremonies and festivals would have been in tune with the moon.
So
and
everything was linked to fertility. It was the only reason that they thought that the moon was on. There weren't other reasons. It was all connected to.
Well, there might have been other reasons, but in the time of ancient Greece, these main deities would have had celebrations at the full and new moon and sort of thing. So, yeah, I think that's the answer I've given. Yeah. Someone else?
Nick, have you got a theory on how the moon got there?
Well, we went over the 4 theories which astronomers have tried to have, and I think maybe in some very early epoch, space and time weren't quite the same as they are now, and perhaps the moon is older than the space-time world we now live in. I don't think there's any rational explanation of how we've got a satellite that large. May I just say, it's far too far away to be a proper satellite. It's 30 Earth diameters away from us, and at that great distance, much further than any other satellite of other planets, and at that great distance it's not actually held within Earth's gravitational field. It orbits around the Sun together with us. It looks to us as if it's orbiting around the Earth, but it's actually always twice as strongly more pulled by the Sun than the Earth, due to its enormous distance away. So it's a total enigma what on earth a companion planet that big, that far away is doing. And that distance is totally crucial. If it was a tiny bit closer, we'd have enormous floods over all the country all the time. So everything is somehow just finally adjusted, and I don't think we can explain it. Yeah.
So we have a miracle of location, we have a miracle of exact size that gives us the relationship that creates the giant pyramid.
Yeah.
Which kind of implies that the moon can only be that size and in that place.
It does, yeah.
Right. So
and we could say that the word measurement, I think measurement comes from mensuration and menstrual. I think the experience of menstrual as the lunar month, measuration and measurement, I think it all comes out. I think a whole lot of maths comes out from the moon's movement and the interaction of the sun and moon.
it kind of looks like it was a necessary component to create the planet Earth environment.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
First,
Yeah.
was this,
I mean, experts believe we've got a magnetic field somehow because it's stirred up by the moon. That the moon makes the Earth wobble a bit and stirs up the inside. Whether or not that's so.
what was also an important component is it was too static, the thing. You don't get the triggering processes which occur in evolution change.
Right. Yeah.
It's just fascinating the way it's all in such a delicate balance.
It is. Yeah.
Could not be any other.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. Do you want to come and say that?
No.
Oh, right. A gentleman said it's fascinating. It's in a delicate balance that could not be any other, and I think that's so important. Seleni's sphere does have this mystery of balance in this 27.3 period of rotation. Yeah, and I must say there are always other very mysterious periods that are longer, like Metonic cycle and Saros, which have been enormously important culturally, but which have got no business existing at all. They're just funny coincidences. Like for centuries, the Metonic cycle gives you absolute precision when your new moon is full moon, when your calendar months are going to happen.
There's too many of these coincidences.
Well, there are a lot. I think it's part of the divine meaning of the way the cosmos is set up that astronomers nowadays don't want to face. You know.
So the evidence is there, but they'd rather look for an alternative explanation.
Yeah, right. Anyone else? Any other comments at all?
It's quite an obvious comment. Is this not all using the moon and the stars and the sun? It's just a way of trying to develop the concept of time, isn't it? That's really what's going on. If you don't watch the planets and the way they move around, then you can't really. It's a
totally, yeah. The Oxford Dictionary defines the moon as that star by which time is measured. So our primary experience of time comes from the moon, yeah.
What is this necessity to make sense of time? Time is like a tyranny, isn't it, over us? It's a control mechanism.
Well, I think if we tuned into the moon, we wouldn't experience it so much as a tyranny. If we had lunar months, and it's said that cultures that have lunar calendar, there's less crime and violence. And I think youngsters today would be less alienated from the world if we did have months that were lunar, so you could see in the sky about when the month begins, which as Muslims do. So Muslims, obviously, their month begins when they see the crescent moon.
So when people talk about things like parallel universes, usually it's something to do with the time. Time sort of blinkers us to the possibilities of other sort of other universes, other parallel.
Right.
Planes of existence.
Planes of existence, right. Well, there's always lots of stories of strange glows on the moon that astronomers reported for years, and they were scoffed at. Strange lights and glows down through the centuries, and then I think a Russian astronomer measured them spectrally. See, and then they suddenly became okay. And now astronomers admit that there are strange glows on the moon, especially from a particular crater, Aristarchus. Strange purple glows light up.
What about the Apollo 11 and not talking about the base on the far side?
Yeah, well, I think they were very strictly instructed not to talk about a whole lot of stuff, and also switch over to a different radio station when they talked about some UFO they saw. I think they did see all sorts of strange things on the moon.
So has that made it into scientific circles of discussion?
Well, no, I think it's how the human race was kind of cheated. People went out there and you got a totally desiccated version of what they'd done and seen there, which had to be acceptable for American TV, and that it was all blocked out, you see.
None of the astronauts have ever piped up and said that there was more to it than that.
Yes, they have. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and something they saw something while they were voyaging towards the moon. I think that they've often had experiences of being accompanied. Yeah, I think that was part of. Anyone?
What did they say?
Yeah.
What did they say?
What did they say? Yeah.
Well, don't ask me.
But like what?
Hoagland. I quite recommend Hoagland's book, Dark NASA. I think he's got quite an authentic connection with the transcripts from tapes and stuff for the idea of strange things being experienced by the astronauts.
Coming back to Stonehenge, you were talking about the 29.5 stones.
Yeah.
Are there still 29.5 stones there now? Or is that, because it doesn't look like a full circle?
No, it's not a full circle, no. Some stones have been destroyed, quite a lot of them, but experts can easily tell where the ground has been impacted for thousands of years, you see. So there's no doubt about where the stones are in Stonehenge. Yeah, I think with Avebury there's a bit of doubt, but I think they could easily find out the one.
Geophysical doesn't show the disturbance at Avebury so well then?
I think they could easily do if they wanted to.
And nobody's done it to full geophys at Avebury?
Well, I think they've shown that 27 is the most likely number, but somehow it's not. They don't get any kudos from answering that question properly.
No, I'm just surprised you've given the impression that the geophysical guys haven't scanned every inch of the ground at Avebury.
No, I don't think they've. Well, they haven't reported it in such a way that you can clearly shows how many stones there were.
It would be such a simple thing to do.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. I think there's just one person, Robin Heath, who's brought up this. And unfortunately, he hasn't got a doctorate, so he can't be in any university position. But he's a sort of Welsh visionary who I think the mantle of Alexander Tom has descended on him, and I think very valuable what he's found out. But he doesn't get supported. The main guy's someone called Ruggles, Clive Ruggles, who's quite kind of nihilistic in terms of the image of primitive man. That they couldn't even count the number of stones they put up. That's the basic assumption.
Well, that's the A word, isn't it? Assume.
Yeah. Okay, is that the lot? Okay, I think we're finished. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Debt Free TV, in association with GetOutOfDebtFree.org.